Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills, and grit take centre stage. I'm your host, Donal O'Donoghue, and this is episode 14. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, talent solutions that transform businesses globally, and Finero, the multi-award-winning tax experts who support financial success for contractors, freelancers, and solopreneurs. This episode, I'm really pleased to be joined by Dan O'Sullivan, who is a mobility expert and has a very strong social media following with over 500,000 followers and subscribers. So we're going to dive into all that good stuff. Welcome back home.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be home. Only home about 12 hours.
Very
I like coming home, seeing everybody. But it's no longer home for me. It's somewhere I come every so often.
Well, we'll get into that stuff, but we always like to start at the beginning. So tell us about your life growing up.
So I'm from the north side of Dublin. I come from a working class family where we grew up in a place called Bayside near Raheny, so close to Howth. For most people, it's like a small peninsula just on the outskirts of Dublin City. And yeah, most of my life I spent playing sports, very, very active. Interestingly, I played a sport that my family didn't play, so I entered into the world of Gaelic football and hurling, and none of my family members had played it. My father played soccer, so mainly because it was behind our house, and I went around one day and just fell in love, and the Gaelic world has actually opened my world as I grew older with a lot of opportunities work-wise and all that, which I can obviously get into. Went to a public school, had some great friends, went to an all-boys school. It was a Catholic-based school, not super strict in terms of religion, but we definitely had a bit of faith when we were growing up. Probably lost a little bit now that I live in Australia, in a bit of more of a multicultural place.
And what were you into as a kid? So obviously the GAA was a big thing for you, but when you were getting into secondary school and stuff like that, what path did you think you would take in life? What career did you think that you would end up doing?
Interestingly, when I was young, I used to draw a lot. So I had this vision of becoming an architect as a kid. I put, I guess, a lot of everything that I've done in my life, I put as something that's been super valuable to what I do now. In that space, I did technical drawing in school, and I guess for anybody who's ever done it, there's a lot of finesse and there's a lot of patience needed. And there's a lot of understanding that you're piecing things together for a final product. And I guess that stands to me a lot with the stuff that I do. Interestingly, I was that typical teenager who was big into cars. I had a car from a very young age. As soon as I could do my lessons, I started driving and, passed my test after 6 weeks and got straight into that kind of mentality. I'm saying this because I ended up working in the motor industry from when I finished school at 19, and I was in that kind of on my full-time basis till I was 27. So I worked for Toyota, and then when I traveled the world, I actually ended up working for Toyota on 2 occasions to get me through travel. So the benefit of what I've encountered throughout my life is I've had some really, really good mentors, whether that be coaches on football teams, whether that was the jobs that I did. I had some really, really good mentors who potentially didn't know what they were giving me was going to be life skills that I've brought to the table today. But persistence, respect, all these sort of things are stuff that were really taught to me. So I mentioned that, I come from a working class family, and sometimes my family don't understand what I do, and I guess the confidence that I have to expose myself to new challenges. And what's helped me along the way is that they've always supported it, even though they didn't understand.
What would they say if I asked them, what does Dan do? How would they describe it?
Guess it depends on who you ask, but I'd say my mom probably just says he works hard, he does something on social media, and it allows him to travel the world. If you ask my dad, it's probably if he jumped out of an airplane, he'd land on his feet. So I guess it depends on, the context. But what they do is they fully support everything. One of the best things my dad ever said is, I haven't got to travel the world, but I do it through your eyes. So that was really nice.
That's lovely.
Mm.
So tell us, you played GAA to pretty decent level. Where did football take you?
So I started Gaelic football at around 8 years of age, just in kind of like mini leagues, which is what most people do. And then when you get to 9 or 10, it might have changed now. There's usually like an under 10s team, and if you're good enough, you go and you play for them. And then I played Gaelic football for the first 5 years, like till about under 13s, under 14s. And then just due to friends that I was palling around with, I went and played soccer. I was always kind of playing both, but there gets to a certain point where you have to choose. And I started playing soccer for about a year, and it just wasn't for me. It wasn't. I didn't enjoy it as much. I ended up going back and playing Gaelic football around 16, and I got into the first team, and that kind of like was what ignited, I guess, everything that I do now, because it ignited. I guess it made me a bit more mature because I was now playing against adults. I had to look at my own discrepancies and then work on those to make me more efficient, I guess. So looking at myself and seeing what my skill set was, I had good speed, but I was still quite young. I had a great eye for the game, but I needed to build more strength. I needed to understand the game just a little bit better in terms of experience. So Gaelic football brought me community for sure, and that has actually stood to me when I've travelled. So I mentioned off screen that I played Gaelic football in Australia, I played Gaelic football in Boston, and when I moved to Australia, the first thing I did was search for a Gaelic team, because I knew that you're more likely to meet people who have similar interests if you're playing the same sport. And that stood to me. I've got friends that are still my friends today based off going to Australia, and at the start we were just randomers playing the same sport, and then you become lifelong friends. So that's been pretty good. And I think that's what the Gaelic community does, because Gaelic's a little bit different for anybody who doesn't know what it is. It's obviously an Irish sport, but very few people change Gaelic teams. In soccer teams, like I played for 4 different soccer teams, there's not as much loyalty, right? And I feel in Gaelic, you usually play for your parish, you play for the area that you're from, and you don't change to another team. And that stands to me in the sense of like, sometimes you just have to push through things and you have to appreciate things. And if I'm playing for a soccer team one year and I don't get on with a few players and I leave and I go to another team, don't have to worry about those people anymore. If I'm playing for the same football team, we got to talk it out and got to work on it. Okay, next year we're going to do things better. And you might have had a gripe with somebody might be fighting for your place. These are things that come in, year out, when you're with the same people for a long period of time. I mean, I played for the guts of 10 years, right, in the senior team. So you're going to see a lot of the same people for an extended period of time.
Yeah. And in terms of playing GAA and, picking up some injuries along the way, tell us a little bit about how you kind of developed your career as a mobility coach.
Yeah, so I've unfortunately had a lot of injuries in my life. Some I don't like. I don't naturally talk about them a lot, because I feel like most people, when they come to work with me, it's not really about me. It's like, how can you help like that person? At 8 years of age, I was hit by a car. Light was red. I stepped out. He broke the lights. He rolled over my leg. I had a compound fracture in my tib and fib, so both bones broken and sticking out of my leg. So at the time, I was put into a fiberglass plaster Paris, so right up to the top of my leg as an 8-year-old, slugging that around for a couple of months. And I still believe that played a big, heavy part in discrepancies that I have in my body, right? Because, 7 to 12 are your massive formative years in terms of you're now becoming a man, or at least growing into that. So that plays havoc on me still to this day. And I've had to work really, really hard to move more efficiently. The downside of Gaelic football for me was I had too many injuries. And I guess the only negative that I have for that was I felt every time I got going and I had a good run of play, something would crop up. So, I tore my hamstrings a lot. I tore my ligaments in my ankles a lot. Dislocated my collarbones or shoulder, AC. So like a lot of just niggling injuries. I had concussion 3 times. I've had a few accidents as well. You might notice, but I was glassed at an early age and I ended up with 24 stitches in my eye, so nearly lost my eye. So Yeah, when I tell people I have a lot of injuries, they don't believe it until I start running the list off, right? But if you've ever had a major injury, and I'm talking about like a blunt trauma, like you're talking 6-7 months rehab to get back into the sport, or even just get back to something. I mean, you played sport, you're well aware. So again, if I look at the positives from my injuries, they've allowed me to understand the mental aspect of it, especially post trauma. And that's something that you can't read about in a textbook. Like you can read all the textbooks in the world and they'll tell you do this exercise until you feel this and then progressively overload and do this. But like if you've had if you've gone from being able to squat 2.5 times your body weight to now not even being able to flex your knee, like that plays a lot on your head, especially when you are somebody who's competitive and is trying to get back out onto the field as soon as you can. And so that showed me a lot of like, there's a process. And I'm very much one of these people that's like, it is what it is. Like I can bitch and moan about it. I can continue going on about it, or I can just say it happened. It happens to other people. What do I got to do to get back to what it is that I want to do? So when I was coming back from injuries, I've broken arms, I've dislocated fingers, I've broken my leg. So they were big recoveries. I tore my knee 3 times as well, and got surgery twice. Didn't get surgery the last time because I did a bit more research into, what's the pros and cons of actually going back under the knife as opposed to just doing the work and getting good stability around the knee and the hips and the ankles. So I opted not to get surgery the 3rd time. In saying that, the ACL was still intact, so it was just cartilage, which I think most people who played sport, if we were to investigate, there's probably some tears or at least like a bit of trauma in there. So I played Gaelic football till I was 27. I had a few injuries coming into the last 2 years, which then started to make me lose the love of it a little bit. And to be honest, I've only watched 2 games of football since I stopped playing. So and one of them was because it was a guy same age as me who last year captained a team in Boston to the A final. So that's kind of why I watched it. I watched that on YouTube live. So that was pretty cool to watch someone same age as me still dominating it in the highest level. So when I stopped playing, I went from this void. Like I played hurling as well. So I mean, most days training 5 hours. I used to finish up work, go to the gym, train the gym 45 minutes, then I go play Gaelic football. And usually the way Gaelic and hurling works is you might have a league game 1 week for hurling and then the following week you have a league game for football. So whatever, either league or championship, whatever's the more dominant sport that was playing that weekend took preference on the session. So you might do 2 hours of football and then go in and join the hurlers for the last hour, or vice versa if we had a league game. So it was quite high volume, right? And that's something that I've been very accustomed to is high volume of training. So when I finally decided, like, look, I think it's time to hang up the boots a little bit, I had to fill the void. And I don't train because I think I need to train to stay healthy. I train because I really enjoy it. It's good for my head. I'm a very busy person with multiple businesses. So it's like, it's my way of switching off. It's my time. I also have 2 young kids. And as you're aware, takes up a lot of your time. So you got to choose wisely what you're going to do. So at the time I didn't have kids, so I wanted to fill that void in that same kind of volume of training. I was dating someone at the time. We love to just challenge ourselves. We love to just expose ourselves to new training stimulus or whatever. Like at the time we were very much strength and conditioning based, high intensity stuff, like, okay, today we're going to crucify ourselves and do 500 reps of this. Okay, cool. Ready, steady, go. But then I came across a handstand class in Terranure in the movement studio. Awesome place with just, like, in my opinion, the highest level of coaching that Dublin has to offer, because it's, even in a group class, you're getting personalized attention, which I don't see a lot of in Dublin. In Ireland in general, I could be wrong. I've been away for a while, but that's usually my take. So I went there and I was just blown away by the fact that I couldn't do it.
So you were a complete novice when you went in?
Oh, complete novice. I could do a cartwheel. My hamstrings would probably disagree, but like I could do a cartwheel. As a kid, I used to do a little bit of flips and stuff like that, like just because I was fearless, but never did gymnastics. I actually, interestingly, went to my sister's best friend, her dad was a gymnastics coach. My cousins have represented Ireland in gymnastics. My uncle was a gymnastics coach. I went to this person and I said, I was thinking to join gymnastics. And his answer was, you're going to be the only boy. And that for some reason turned me off, which in hindsight probably wouldn't have been a bad idea. That's probably one of my biggest regrets. I don't have a lot of regrets, but I think that was my biggest regret because I see now how even those few years of implementing movement, like you've done martial arts, or like just implementing some of those things, they're going to stand to you for the rest of your life. Obviously, if you neglect it as you age, it's going to deteriorate a little bit, but you can get that back quite quickly. If you're someone who's never had it, it's a longer process. And so that turned me off. But then when I went to this handstand class, I was like, oh, this ignited something in me. This was like, yeah, this is the void that I'm looking for. Like, why can't I do something that a 5-year-old can do? And the reason why I couldn't do it was because, number one, is I couldn't get my arms over my head without arching from my back because I had not really focused on shoulder mobility. And that just it just sprung a light bulb in me. I reached out to some of the coaches that were there and I literally was like, teach me. I need to understand this. And yeah, it allowed me to immerse myself into learning more. At the time, I had just come back from Boston. I tore my knee, had surgery in America. I was of no use, so they shipped me back to Ireland. And I decided to go back to college and study computer science. So at the time, I had a little bit of excess time, right, in between classes. I was just in the NCI here, and they have this awesome gym just underneath. So I used to go in there, practice my handstands, and I was probably devoting, like, everything was handstands. Like, I really mean this. Everything had to make my handstands better. So if it was improving my hip mobility, if it was, making my arms better in an overhead position, all of it was to work towards this visual skill. And this is something that I instill in anybody who works with me, is visual skills are addictive because I can see what I'm working towards. If I'm just standing there in front of a gym and I'm just doing weights, and that's awesome. But for a lot of people, the plateau is higher because you kind of get bored. You're like, well, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just lifting heavier weights, but it's still the same stuff every single week. Whereas when you have a skill that you're working towards, there's so much more deciphering involved. There's so much more understanding of your own limitations. So it becomes a lot more addictive. And that's basically what happened. So much so that in the second year of college, I was sitting there trying to learn Java and learn all these things to help my computer skills, and all I wanted to do was handstand on the wall. Sounds like absolutely crazy, but that's true story. So much so I was back home living with my parents, and I was doing handstands, and like I have like this awesome like handstand reel, and it's usually me on the same door, and the dogs beside me, landed on the dogs, hit the radiator, broke the door, all this crazy stuff. But then I decided, I got an opportunity to go back to Australia. I had been in Australia. We were ill-advised, didn't get a visa to stay there long term, had to leave. That's why I went to Boston to play Gaelic football. And so when I went back to Australia, I had been studying a particular style of training. It was called gymnastics bodies. It was this ex-American gymnastics coach had created this kind of real simplistic in its approach for adults who'd never understood. Like, you weren't doing flips or anything. That was very much all the basics that like good gymnasts do, all the core work, all the like understanding the discrepancies in your body, all this sort of stuff. And then the handstands, the rings, all this sort of stuff. So that really immersed me into that. And weirdly, they had affiliates around the world. They had a couple of them, or a few of them. And one of them just happened to be 5 minutes from where I was staying in Australia. So I just, yeah, cool, signed. This is faith. I went there. They had like 11 classes a week. I dived into it, trained every single session that we could do. And I was doing it more from a learning perspective. Obviously, don't get me wrong, it made me really nice and fit and healthy. But I was learning from other people. And then what we did in this particular facility is we hosted a lot of certificates around mobility, around like strength training, all these different things. So what I did was I was like, okay, I'm going to be a sponge here. And I'm going to learn from everybody. And I think that's important for anybody in any skill that you do, right? And then what you do is you mold it into what you feel is the best for you, your teaching skills, and the people that you want to work with. So I immersed myself in Australia. I was training 5 hours a day, and I got really, really good at handstands. So much so that I got to the level of balancing on one hand. So do I advise that for most people? Well, it depends on what your circumstances are. I was single. I spent most Friday nights, Saturday nights in the gym, training for hours, just
Completely
literally
obsessed with handstands.
like people who are listening to this who know me will be laughing because it's so true, but like literally that was all I cared about. It's so weird, but in a way it's made me move so much more efficiently now, because what people have to understand, I wasn't spending 5 hours on my hands. It was everything had to make me better at handstands. So the actual time on my hands, obviously that grew as my volume got better, but usually it would be like at the start was maybe 15 minutes towards the end of the session.
And you've built a community of people over 500,000 followers on your Instagram, which is Hansdan, HANSDAN.
So that's where I came from, Hands, Dans, and Dan.
Yeah. And, thousands of subscribers on YouTube. So obviously people are seeing the ability to develop competence with handstands as the gateway to better mobility and better health.
Interestingly, that's how it started. And for me, in 2017, I remember writing to my friend in Ireland and I said, I just bought a camera. I'm going to start doing YouTube videos. And he sent me the screenshot only like a year ago. And it was really funny to see. And I just thought I was going to be this handstand coach. I thought that was my infatuation. But actually what happened was I was sitting at around, I'd done a few crafty things on social media to try and build my following, but I was sitting around 2,000 followers. At the time, Reels wasn't a thing. So I used to piggyback a few of the big companies that I had gone and learned from, knowing that they would reshare my videos if I made them really interesting. And that allowed me to grow another 1,000 or 2,000. It was around September 2022. I was sitting around 5,000 followers. It was actually 5,500 followers, I think it was. And so that was September 2022. January 2022, I decided to go a bit more whole hog on TikTok. I had opened a TikTok 3 years previous, and I think I posted like 3 videos and just left it. But I was following a lot of people on social media who promote how to build on social media. So I was like, well, they're constantly all barking the same thing. Maybe I should start to implement a few of these tactics. Weirdly, and this is my own issue, Instagram I always looked at as people who knew me. Well, as TikTok, I was like, nobody knows me. I can try these new bold kind of things. And I always tried to be authentic. I wanted me to be the person that you see on screen. So if you meet me in person, it's the exact same. And I struggled probably for 4 years of like trying to get that out there. Like I posted most days for 4.5 years. On TikTok, I started to just be a little bit bold and try new things. And this is when this is what TikTok does. It's performance-based. So if you keep me entertained, I'll watch for longer. So there's a bit of approach to what I was doing. I was creating good hooks, getting people like to question something, showing them then where they're bad, and I can explain in a second, and then giving them a solution and then retesting. And so on TikTok, I posted the video about how to touch your toes. And then I said, this is what I'm going to do. Can you give me this amount of time? Okay, let's go and test it. Okay, try to touch your toes. Here's an exercise. Now retest it. I did 6 or 7 different variations of that. And I posted it on TikTok. And they all performed really, really well. I'm talking millions of views. So I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. And then I said, do you know what? I was such a perfectionist. And I used to always like not put videos out on Instagram if it wasn't perfect. I decided just to post this video. It was a little bit blurry and stuff like that. Put it out there and went to bed or whatever. Woke up the next day and I said to my fiance, Amy, I said, we've grown by 200 followers. Like at the time, Instagram, like to me, it was quite dormant. It wasn't really doing anything. So 200 followers in a day was a bit, okay. And then the next day I was like, babe, we've just grown by like 2,000 followers. Like, I don't know what's happening. And then every time I logged into the app, there was 100 new followers, 100 new followers, 100 new followers. And it was just going at this like rapid pace. And then it just became like crazy. I had to turn off my notifications. I was getting thousands upon thousands of messages that I just like, I actually did get back to every single one, which was like a crazy amount of time. We went from 5,500 to over 300,000 in the course of about, I think it was about 12 days.
And what do you put that down to?
At the time, it was when Instagram were introducing Reels, and they were obviously had switched to be performance based, very similar to TikTok. I obviously had trialed that formula on TikTok, knew that it worked, had started to implement it into Instagram, and it was basically just feeding the algorithm, which is what they wanted to do, right? And the reason how I know it was algorithm based was because it was consistent. It was 100 followers, 100 followers, 100 followers. So basically what happens is, for anyone who doesn't know, you put a video out, they send it to 10% of your followers. If they engage with it to a certain point, or if they share it, or if they save it, then it scores, and then they'll send it to more, and then they'll send it to more. So because it's that consistent, then it was obviously working, right? And so that was insane. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It was a very emotional time for me because, you know, I put a serious amount of effort into my social media, a lot that people don't see. I struggled with a lot of health issues for about 2 years, and I never let that get in the way of building content. So basically I had a lot of gut issues, so much so that every 6 weeks I would end up on the floor, you know, with violently sick, basically from both ends. Couldn't work out what it was, went to all the specialists. They thought it was a parasite. We tried to fight it, but it still wasn't changing. And then in 2019, I came back to Ireland and Scotland, and my sister was getting married, and we went to Scotland, and I was sick for 5 days. I had this like blunt pain in my stomach, went to hospital, couldn't work out what it was. I then flew back to Australia by myself just because there was big fires in Australia at the time, and we had a 3-month-old, so we kept her away from it. It was very smoky where we were living. And when I went over there, it was about 4 weeks later, I just was miserable. Like, I was like waking up in pools of sweat, couldn't work out what it was. Like, it was just getting debilitating. I was still training, and then I remember one day, it was a Monday, I trained my abs, and then by the Friday, I was still feeling really sick in my stomach, like I had overtrained my abs. But I was like, I can't even bring my knee up past my hip, and, you know, I like to think I'm pretty flexible. Ended up, you know, my partner was like, look, just go to the hospital, like, stop messing about. Went to the hospital. They said, look, can we do a blood test? Sure. Did a blood test. They were like, you got an infection somewhere. We need to, if you're okay with it, do a CT scan. I was like, sure, like whatever needs to be done. And then after the CT scan, they were like, we can't find your appendix. They were like, it's burst. And so I was like, oh. They were like, you've got a 6 by 5 centimeter abscess where your appendix should be. And so basically what had happened, I feel, is that I had like a leaky gut, which a lot of places won't, what's the word? Like, they won't confirm. And so I think every 6 weeks I was getting a certain level of toxicity in my body. And then, you know, my body wanted to get rid of everything. And so long story short, I ended up having surgery. It was about over an 8-week period. Because I wasn't in pain, we fought it with antibiotics, right? So the reason why I'm saying this is because there's some videos that I recorded. What I used to do is I used to put my kid to bed. My partner used to go sleep, and then I used to go into my friend's gym in the middle of the night, and I used to film all my content for hours. And so it's like, I'm saying this because most people think it's like, oh yeah, just post a little bit on content. Like, the more structured you are, and even in the back end of stuff, like, you see my social media videos, you don't see the exercise libraries I've created, anything that anybody who comes and works with me, like all those detailed videos, like, they all take time to do, right? And so my sicknesses obviously were a bit of a setback, but because I was so regimented and I believed what I wanted to do, there was nothing getting in my way. And that's just the way I live my life, right? And so when I got to that 300,000, I was like, this is working. So then what I used to do is every Sunday for 2 hours, I would film content. I got very polished. So I used to record about maybe 14 pieces of content that I could post out. And then I would eventually got to the stage where I had to hire somebody to edit them because it just wasn't feasible me trying to do that as well.
And what was the goal? Was the goal to grow and have more, you know, group clients, one-on-one clients, or was the goal to build what's effectively a marketing business?
Interestingly, like, I first did it because I just really enjoyed it. I'm a little bit of a tech geek. That's why I kind of went into study computer science. And I used to love making videos. I used to love editing the videos. You know, depending on the time of day, I'd either have a coffee or a beer, and I'd just sit down and edit all the videos. But when it started to go crazy, I to be honest, I didn't know. Like, I'd never imagined it was going to go from 5,500 to 500,000 in a 3-month period. Like, because when we got to 300, then it still grew, but it was a little bit like slowed down a little bit. But then a lot of opportunities started to come from it. I guess when I post, I don't post for likes or comments. It's not what I was doing. I was posting because I really wanted to help people. And so I knew by putting out good content would try to, I guess in a way, I'm trying to show you what I can do in a very short space of time, so that if you do come and work with me, like what I say to people is like, if you're enjoying the free stuff, can you imagine what the paid stuff is like? And so a lot of opportunities came about. One of the biggest ones was the Hard Rock Hotel in the Maldives actually flew us out to train some of their guests. So we went out for 2 weeks in the November 2022. Then they said they were doing a longer thing the following year. So we went out for 6 weeks. And that was all expenses paid, all free. And so that's the sort of stuff that came about from the exposure, I guess. And, you know, I now work with some brands who I believe in. So even some Irish brands. That's what I'm wearing today, New Dimensions, which is an Irish brand. That's the sort of stuff that comes with exposure. But it's free marketing. like I see a lot of social media experts who like say, you know, just run some ads. And yes, you can run ads. But if you can give 2 hours a week, and it still works. I have friends who've gone from 9,000 to 500,000 doing similar kind of stuff. It still works. If you can just get in the trenches and do 2 hours a week, trust me, if you've got a hotel knocking on your door, flying you and all your family out, like paying for everything, like it's worth it.
Yeah, it's nice if you can get it. So tell us about what you're doing back in Ireland and also what life consists of at the moment in terms of how you divide your time between your clients and the work you're doing.
So I live on the Gold Coast. I live in Australia. I tend to get up around 5 a.m. Mainly because of time zones. I work with a lot of people in America. So for that first 2.5 hours is usually devoted to work and people, like if I'm doing calls with anybody, or because I do group calls also. I also have a team of people that work for me, so they do some of my group calls as well. And then I'm a very hands-on father, so I usually switch off and then spend a lot of time with my kids, especially in that dead space of the day. So I first off, I came back to Ireland because I wanted to upskill. I still love to learn. 2017, I was exposed to Wim Hof and ice baths and all that sort of stuff. And then I came across Oxygen Advantage, which is more performance-based breath teacher training. And so I decided to upskill. So I came back to do 3 days of that. And then also last year I had just missed out time-wise because I had left Ireland to go back to Australia on Wellfest. So this year did a handstand class and a mobility class. And then weirdly, when I was leaving Australia, I wanted to do a podcast. So it was nice that we got kind of, we crossed paths, and honored to sit here today and kind of tell people a little bit about my story. So I like to come back to Ireland. It's still home, but for me and my family, my way of living is very much get up early, get out and enjoy the sunrise. I've found a really nice community where I live now. We've got a really nice house, and I've got a swimming pool on my property. You don't have that in Ireland. like that's unheard of. So it ticks a lot of boxes for the way I want to live my life, right?
And when you think about the clients that you work with now, that are, suffering with poor mobility, like we talked a little bit earlier on when you're talking about handstands, about, poor shoulder mobility, which I think, particularly because the amount of people that sit at a desk, hunched at a desk all day, that aren't kind of doing any of that type of work. What are the common things that you're seeing clients coming to you with, and what are the possibilities in terms of the progress they can make?
The biggest thing that I get from most people is hips and lower back, because obviously I think we spend about 80% of our day sitting down. We're sitting down now, and it's not even the sitting down; it's the twisted positions that our body has found ourselves in. It's the not getting up and moving consistently. It's not getting out and enjoying, walks and whatnot. So what I usually, I have a very simplistic approach to training. Simple doesn't mean easy though. Simplistic in the sense of, if you're a human being, there's certain things that your body should be able to do. Some people might be able to do it better than you, but there's certain things that you should be able to do. And I can break it down. So if you think of your shoulders, the ball socket joint, you think of your hip, it's a ball socket joint. There should be elements of rotation in there. For a lot of people, we focus on linear patterns when we're training. So you think of a deadlift, you think of a squat, you think of you know, these movements that are very much in the same plane of motion. But the reality is, for most people, we're not getting injured in the perfect positions. We're getting injured in the, you know, I stepped off a curb and I realized it was a little bit deeper than I thought, rolled my ankle. So we might as well be prepared for these. And that's basically what I teach people. The whole idea, so my training philosophy is prehab for performance. And the idea behind that is prepare yourself, because everybody has to perform every day. If you're a single mom with 3 kids and you've had a very bad night's sleep and you've got a back pain and your kid's on the floor and wants you to pick them up, you're going to find a way to do it. And that's kind of like my whole ethos is like, why are we so reactive? Like, why can't we be proactive? And handstands is one thing. Handstands is just your visual skill. It's your reward for the hard work. And if I can show you things and open your world, I believe that everything in life is on a continuum. And if you just appreciate that, then you can progress. So everybody in life has really benefited from a mentor. We've always learned from people. So if I can teach you how to get to somewhere and I show you the steps, then you know there's work to be done if you really want to achieve whatever it is that is on that continuum, right? And we want to get to some level of autopilot, right? So in our body, like for a lot of things, especially in a rehab context, I talk about localizing it. So it's like, okay, I'm really going to focus on my shoulder now. But I want to get more efficient in my global movements. So if I want to hang, if I want to do a cartwheel, if I want, like, I'm still training my shoulders, I'm still doing these things, but I'm not like, if you think of it, so you did martial arts. If you're standing there and you've got a guy in front of you who's about to kick the head off you, the last thing you're going to do is, okay, are my glutes activated? Is my oblique working here? You're not thinking that, right? But maybe when you're training, you're saying, okay, I noticed that I had a bit of instability in my hip. Maybe I should focus on my glutes. You see what I mean? So in your training context, you're really localizing your deficiencies or your discrepancies. But you're doing it so that at the point of autonomy and at that point where you don't have to think about it, it just happens naturally. And that's what I try to teach people, because yours might be martial arts. Another person might be just getting up and down off the floor. If I can give you that skill back, your life has changed dramatically. Because I think the stats are, for people over 65, they'll have at least one fall a year. And the biggest admission for people over 65 into hospital is a fall. So it's like, if I can prepare you for that, it's going to happen. Like, I fall. Like, it's going to happen. So you might as well be prepared for it. And that's not to scare anybody. It's just to show you, like life's unfair at times. But why not be prepared for these things? And when I show you visual skills and then I show you the way to work towards it, and then I relate that, hey, you learning how to put your hand over your head to get a handstand is actually just helping you be strong with your hand over your head. And that's what creates more of an addiction for people, because a lot of the people that I train are a little bit older. They're the brunt of people that I work with are 50 to 70. My oldest client's 76.
What's their typical goal? Is it that they want to have
They're in pain.
Okay.
Usually okay. They're like, hey, your videos resonate with me. Okay. I like your no bullshit approach.
So they're in pain and they've probably identified a lack of mobility or something that there, as you said, there's a glitch or there's something that they know isn't quite right. Do you also have a cohort of people that just want the challenge, want to learn how to be able to do a handstand, want to learn how to be able to do a front split, or is that a smaller minority?
It's a smaller minority from the start. I would say it grows when you actually opens people's space, because if I'm in a lot of pain, the last thing I'm thinking about is a handstand. I'm thinking about getting out of that pain. But the beauty of that is, if I can get you to some level where you are like, oh, this pain's manageable now. Actually, do you know what? I wouldn't mind trying a handstand. And that's what I open people's eyes to, because they might initially come to me because they sit at a desk for long periods of time. They don't want to go to a gym. They don't like the gym. Okay, cool. I'm going to show you things you can do at home. Full workouts that you're going to be tired afterwards and you're going to get stronger from. I say, you give me 12 weeks. If you're not happy at the end of it, I'll give you your money back. I've yet to give anybody their money back. That's not arrogance, it's confidence, because it's like, I know that the people who do the work get what they want, and they get what they want out of this training. And then most people stay on. They're like, okay, right, I'm giving you 12 weeks, right? Now show me what I can do. And so, I've got people in their 70s learn how to handstand. Handstands is only just a visual. Like, it could be anything. Like, I work on the gymnastics rings. It could be, getting up to a bodyweight squat. Like, these are all visual skills. The reason why I pick visual skills over, say, weights and stuff like that is because some people can get fixated on I want to deadlift 100 kilos. I'm like, well, why? you're 50 kilos in weight. That's twice your body weight.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So most people come to me, I would have to say like 90% of people come to me because they are in pain, and they're like, I saw the testimonials that you did. Like, I had an amazing client, she still works with me, and like, I change people's lives. I don't just get them moving better. Like, this particular individual wasn't going to work. She was working from home. She lived in London, so she had to get like the tube, bus. She couldn't step off a platform, basically. She couldn't walk downstairs. And she was only 43 years of age. Her kneecaps kept slipping. She was a little bit heavier than she wanted to be. And she like was very upset when she initially spoke to me. And all I did was I mapped it out for her, and I said, okay, give me 12 weeks. And as I said, if you're not where you want to be, I'll give you your money back. She's now going to a gym. So she had no interest in going to a gym. Most of the stuff we did was at home. She's now going to a gym. She's now going back to the office twice a week. She's now going back out and socializing with friends. Like, I've completely transformed her life, but I also have her moving better, which is the most important thing. And that's the key to this. It's like, if you don't feel yourself, then you're not going to want to do the things that you potentially enjoy. And the challenge that I give to everybody as they age is, wouldn't it be nice to make a decision based off your interests as opposed to your fear, whether you can actually do it?
That's very true. That's very true. If people want to find out a little bit more, we touched on your Instagram, which is at Hands, H-A-N-S.
Your hands, yeah.
H-A-N-D-S, is it?
Hands
down.
down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your YouTube?
It's everything is Hands Down.
Okay.
Any social media platform. Website's handsdown.com. So I'm Irish. I like to keep things simple.
Very good.
But we work with everybody. Obviously, I do have a demographic that's a lot older because of the way I message things, but I'm pretty confident. I've worked in this industry for 22 years. I've trained everybody from athletes, Olympic athletes, all the way down to, Debbie with 4 kids, and trained a lot of kids also going into those pubescent years where it's just as important that we teach them that it's not just about trying to lift crazy ass weights and getting yourself injured, and preparing yourself, because if you are really good at sport, as an example, and you're going to go into playing at the highest level, you might as well be prepared for that also.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen it, I saw there's somebody in the UK that does kind of, it's like assisted stretching, but she was working with the English rugby team.
Oh, wow.
And it's remarkable when you see the emphasis that's been put on mobility now and stretching and prehab, that just, if you went back 20 years ago, it just wasn't there. It was rehab. It was when, fix something when it got broken. So I think there's definitely a demand for what you're doing. So we will definitely include your socials in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming in. It's been great to learn about you and your business. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube and follow our Instagram. It's at talentmatters_podcast. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next time.